Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you the next episode about the truth behind Hoài Ca's identity. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel to support me. Lunar New Year officially arrived, carrying with it the unique fragrance of the earth and sky in the first days of spring. The spirit of the season slipped into every home and every small alley, covering everything in warm colors and hope. On the morning of the first day, the sky was high and clear, sunlight as soft as silk resting on peach blossoms, still holding drops of early dew. The spring breeze carried a gentle chill, just enough for people to feel the subtle shift of a new beginning. Throughout the village echoed cheerful New Year greetings. Children's laughter rang bright and clear, while adults asked about the past year and the plans awaiting them ahead. In front of every house, the red of parallel couplets and lucky envelopes stood out against the pale blue sky, like vibrant signals of a fortunate start. Hùng adjusted the collar of his simple traditional áo dài. It wasn't elaborate, but it fit neatly and respectfully, showing his appreciation for the first day of the year. Beside him, Hoài Ca wore a soft, light-colored áo dài. The gentle shade highlighted the calm kindness in her eyes. In their hands were carefully prepared gift bags and bright red lucky envelopes, symbols of blessings for peace and prosperity. "Are you ready?" Hùng asked softly, his voice warm with concern. Hoài Ca nodded lightly. Her gesture was calm, but inside her heart stirred waves she could hardly name. Today they were visiting Hung's former boss to offer New Year wishes, an ordinary courtesy at first glance. Yet what made her heart beat faster was knowing that the elderly man, who had often looked at her with thoughtful eyes, as if holding back unspoken words, would also be there celebrating the holiday with the family. As she stepped through the gate, Hoài Ca felt her heart beat slow with each step. In the yard, the elderly man sat by a tea table. Though time had marked his figure, he still carried a composed presence. His eyes were gentle, yet deep within them lingered a quiet anticipation. When he saw her, he paused. The moment was brief, but enough to reveal a tremor of emotion he could hardly conceal. Then he smiled, his lips quivering slightly as he tried to steady the feelings rising within him. Hùng respectfully stepped forward, bowed to offer New Year greetings, presented the gifts, and handed over the lucky envelopes with sincere reverence. Hoài Ca also bowed gently, her voice soft and polite. "I wish you a healthy and peaceful New Year, Grandpa and Grandma." The words Grandpa and Grandma seemed to make the air pause for a heartbeat. The old man's eyes flickered. Something familiar, yet distant, seemed to touch his heart. The first tea of the year unfolded in warmth. Steam rose from the cups, blending with the faint scent of incense in the old house. Their conversation revolved around simple things: health after a year of changes, the harvest, work, and future plans. Each word was slow and measured, carrying quiet sincerity. In the middle of the conversation, Hoài Ca spoke up, her tone calm but determined. She said that after the holiday, if he agreed, she wished to learn traditional herbal medicine from him. She shared her special love for folk remedies, the scent of sun-dried leaves, the gentle crackle of fire beneath a simmering herbal pot. She hoped to learn so that one day she could help others with that humble yet profound knowledge. The old man looked at her for a long moment, as if searching her face and gestures for something hidden. "When did you start liking herbal medicine?" he asked slowly, as though tracing an old memory. Hoài Ca hesitated slightly. "I don't remember clearly, but since I was little, I've loved the smell of medicinal leaves, loved watching adults prepare herbal decoctions. Sometimes I even dream of running around a garden full of herbs, but I can't remember where." Her words drifted through the quiet house like a missing puzzle piece finally falling into place. The old man's hand trembled slightly against his chair. Long ago, behind this house, there had been a herbal garden. There, a little granddaughter used to toddle after him, asking the names of every plant and herb, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. He slowly stood up. "Everyone, come outside for a moment." He walked toward the backyard. The others followed silently. The garden was still there, though time had left its marks. The herbal beds were no longer as lush as before, but they remained in place like memories that had never been erased. Hoài Ca slowed her steps. Her eyes moved across the garden, then suddenly stopped at a familiar yet distant patch of earth. "Over here, wasn't there once a very fragrant plant?" she asked softly, almost to herself. The old man's voice trembled. "Holy basil." The little girl back then loved that scent. Hoài Ca reached out and touched the aged trunk, the rough bark beneath her fingertips sending an indescribable feeling through her. In that instant, a faint memory flashed alive. The laughter of a child echoed somewhere. A warm hand holding hers, and a deep, gentle voice calling her by a different name. "Grandpa, you used to call me," she faltered, tears blurring her vision. "Little Na." The name rang out in the windless garden like a bell awakening the past. The old man froze, his legs nearly giving way. That was the childhood name of the granddaughter he had searched for in vain for so many years. Trembling, he stepped closer, his eyes searching her face as if afraid that blinking would make everything disappear. "Nah, is it really you?" Hoài Ca could not speak. She simply nodded gently, tears streaming down her cheeks, carrying years of buried emotions finally rising to the surface. The atmosphere inside the old man's house still carried the lively warmth of the first days of the Lunar New Year. Laughter echoed from the yard, and the gentle clink of teacups touching one another followed the familiar rhythm of springtime gatherings. Yet beneath that warmth, a quiet tension lingered in everyone's eyes. No one said it aloud, but all understood that what had happened in the herbal garden was not a simple coincidence. Hoài Ca sat by the tea table, her fingers intertwined. From time to time, her gaze drifted toward the old man before quickly lowering again, as if afraid her unorganized emotions might show. She wanted to believe in what had just happened, to believe that the faint memory was real, that the name Little Na was not just an impulsive utterance born of emotion. But she was also afraid. Afraid that if she believed too deeply and later discovered it was all a misunderstanding, her heart would once again feel lost. The old man leaned slightly forward. His thin but warm hand gently took hers. The grip was not tight, but it carried reassurance. His voice lowered, each word steady yet filled with emotion. "I believe you, but to be certain, let's do a DNA test. Not because I doubt you, but because I want to give you a clear identity." His words held no suspicion, only respect. He did not want to rely solely on feelings and memories. He wanted to give her undeniable confirmation, a bond of blood proven by science, so that nothing would remain uncertain. Hoài Ca looked up at him. There was no hurt in her eyes, only understanding. She nodded softly. Tears fell quietly, heavy but without drama. She knew this was not only an answer for him, it was an answer for her own life as well. For the blank spaces in her memory. For the unexplainable sense of familiarity whenever she stood in that garden. A few days after the new year, when the peach blossoms had begun to fade, Hùng drove Hoài Ca and the old man to the city for the test. The roads still carried traces of the holiday atmosphere, but inside the car was a stretched silence. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts. At the testing center, procedures were handled swiftly yet professionally. When the samples were taken, the old man's hand trembled slightly. 20 years of searching, 20 years of hope and disappointment, now seemed to rest inside a tiny test tube. Just one result, but carrying an entire lifetime of waiting. Hoài Ca looked at him, her heart tightening. She said nothing, only gently squeezed his hand as if to lend him strength. Hung stood beside them, calm but thoughtful. He understood that from this moment on, Hoài Ca's life might turn to an entirely new chapter. The days of waiting stretched long, each one feeling extended beyond measure. Every morning upon waking, Hoài Ca would wonder how many days remained until the result. But instead of drowning in anxiety, she chose to stay busy. She began visiting the old man's house to learn traditional herbal medicine, just as she had promised. He taught her how to identify each leaf by its shape and scent, how to distinguish which roots carried warmth and which carried coolness. He showed her how to simmer herbal medicine at the right heat, not too strong to destroy its properties, not too weak to fail in drawing out the essence. He taught her how to listen to patients, not only with her ears, but with compassion. Hoài Ca absorbed every word. She memorized with her heart. Each time she touched the herbal beds in the garden, she felt as though she had once stood there long ago, in a distant time. The old man watched her work, pride and hope shining openly in his eyes. Even without the result in hand, her gestures and expressions felt like silent confirmation. Hung remained quietly by her side. He drove her back and forth, observing each subtle shift in her emotions. He prepared himself for every possible outcome. If the result matched their hopes, he would celebrate with her. If not, he would be the first to stand beside her so she would not face disappointment alone. To him, what mattered most was not a sheet of paper, but that Hoài Ca would always have a place to lean on. Then the day of the results arrived. The small room at the testing center was so quiet that the rustle of paper could be clearly heard. White ceiling lights illuminated the sealed envelope resting on the table. The staff handed over the result with professional composure, but for the three people standing there, this moment held meaning beyond words. The old man held the envelope, yet his hands trembled too much to open it himself. 20 years of longing left him unable to confront it directly. He turned to Hung and nodded gently, entrusting him with his hope. Hung took the envelope. His hands were not entirely steady as he tore the seal. The soft ripping sound echoed sharply in the silent room, marking a turning point. The paper was unfolded. One clear line stood out undeniable. Biological relationship. Grandfather. Grandchild. Probability, 99.99%. Time seemed to freeze. No one could speak. No further explanation was needed. That number said everything. Then the old man broke into tears. Not silent tears, but the release of a man who had held back for 20 long years. He embraced Hoài Ca tightly, his arms trembling but firm. "Nah, I've found you at last." Hoài Ca cried too. Her tears were no longer of confusion, but of release. For years, she had felt as though a piece of her life was missing. Today, that missing piece had returned to its rightful place. She was no longer a child wandering through spring seasons without roots. She had a family. She had a lineage. She had a place she could finally call by two simple yet sacred words: home. The DNA results confirmed a biological relationship with an almost absolute match. The bold line printed on the white sheet of paper marked the end of a long journey of waiting and the beginning of an entirely new chapter. The small room fell silent for several seconds. No one reacted immediately, and no one was calm enough to speak. Only the pounding of their hearts echoed in their chests, as if trying to confirm that this moment was real. Then a choked sob broke through the stillness. "Nah, you truly are my granddaughter," the old man said, his voice trembling and breaking in his throat. Tears streamed down his time-worn face, tracing the deep lines carved by years and memories. They were not only tears of joy, but the release of 20 years of waiting, of spring after spring spent in emptiness. Hoài Ca burst into tears. The tears flowed freely, carrying with them all the years she had felt that something unnamed was missing from her life. So many springs spent watching others reunite. So many quiet smiles when she heard someone call out the word family. And now, at last, she had a place to return to. No more vague feelings. No more fragmented memories. Everything had been clearly confirmed. Yet within that joy lingered a late sorrow. The old man held her hand more tightly, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing her again. His voice lowered, heavier than before. Your parents, after years of searching in vain, they were overcome with grief and passed away one after the other. They carried the memory of you with them until the very end. The words cut quietly but deeply. Hoài Ca froze. Tears still rested on her cheeks, but her heart tightened painfully. She had found her family, had discovered where she belonged, yet the picture was no longer complete as she had once imagined. She had never heard a gentle voice call her my child. She had never held her father's hand or rested her head on her mother's shoulder to ask why she had once been lost. It was not resentment she felt, but a lingering regret, like arriving just in time for a reunion, only to realize that the two most important people in her story were no longer there. The old man pulled her into his arms. His embrace was aged but steady, as though he wished to make up for those who were gone. He gently stroked her hair, his voice softening. But you still have your grandparents, and your older brother. Hoài Ca looked up in surprise. The words older brother echoed in the room like an unexpected revelation. At that moment, the man standing quietly behind them stepped forward. He was not unfamiliar. He was Hung's superior, the one always serious at work, yet quietly supportive and sincere in his concern for Hung. Today, his usual composure was gone. His eyes were red, fixed on Hoài Ca with overwhelming emotion. I'm sorry that it took me until now to find you. The air seemed to freeze once more. Hung stood silently behind them, his thoughts rapidly connecting pieces that once seemed unrelated. His superior's unusual care toward him. The rare stories about a lost younger sister mentioned in passing. The old man's reflective gaze each new year. All of it now fit together into a complete picture. Hoài Ca trembled as she stepped forward. The distance was only a few steps, yet to her it felt as long as the years she had lived without knowing. Are you really my brother? She asked softly but clearly, as if afraid that speaking too loudly would shatter the moment. The man nodded gently. He told her that for 20 years, he had never stopped searching. As a child, he could only follow his family from place to place, asking in vain. As he grew older and gained more means, he quietly gathered information, following even the smallest leads. He never imagined that the young woman Hung loved, the one he had met on several occasions, was the very sister he had lost. His voice was not raised, but every word carried the sincerity of years without surrender. Hoài Ca did not wait any longer. She stepped forward and embraced him. That hug required no explanation. There were only tears, the compensation of time, and the distance of 20 years shortened into a single moment. He tightened his arms around her, as if trying to make up for the years she had grown up alone. There were no accusations, no resentment. Only presence and the certainty that from this day forward, they would never lose each other again. The old man watched the two siblings, tears still flowing. The pain of loss remained, but it was now warmed by reunion. The family was no longer complete as it once had been, but those who remained had found one another. And in that small room, after so many years of waiting, a home was rebuilt by truth, by blood ties, and by hearts that had never stopped searching for each other. Hung stood quietly, watching the reunion unfold before his eyes, his heart filled with an emotion too deep to name. He had once believed he was simply standing beside the woman he loved, silently protecting and accompanying her. But now he realized it had become something far greater than that. He had not only helped Hoài Ca rediscover her roots, he had unintentionally become the thread that stitched back together a family torn apart for 2 long decades. 20 years is long enough for memories to fade, long enough for hope to flicker and nearly die out. And yet, in just one early spring morning, everything seemed to fall back into its rightful place. Hùng looked at the old man tightly holding Hoài Ca's hand, at her brother quietly wiping away tears, and a quiet peace rose within him. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just the steady feeling that he had done what was right. The reunion meal that day was simple, yet warmer than any meal before it. The table was filled with familiar spring dishes, their fragrance spreading gently throughout the house. The atmosphere was no longer tense like when they had waited for the results. Instead, it was filled with the warmth of people who had found each other again after a long journey. The old man lifted his teacup, his eyes resting lovingly on Hoài Ca before he spoke firmly. After the new year, Na will come stay with me for a while to learn herbal medicine. Not just to learn the craft, but to reconnect with our family's roots. His voice was calm but decisive. It was not merely a plan for the future, it was a declaration that from now on, Hoài Ca had truly returned. Returned not only in name, but in responsibility and in the continuation of tradition. Hoài Ca nodded softly. The uncertainty that once clouded her eyes was gone, replaced by clear conviction. She understood that learning herbal medicine was more than acquiring a skill. It was her way of touching memories once broken, of reconnecting the family bond with her own hands and heart. Her brother turned to Hùng. His gaze no longer carried the reserved distance of a superior toward a subordinate, but the sincere gratitude of a man who had just found his sister again. Thank you. Not only for being a capable employee, but for bringing my sister back to us. The words echoed warmly across the dining table, filled with genuine appreciation. Hùng paused for a brief moment. He had never expected gratitude for this. To him, everything had unfolded naturally, as if he had simply followed the call of his heart. He bowed his head modestly, his voice steady. I only did what I should have done. It was a short answer, but it said everything. No pride. No claim of credit. Just sincerity. The meal continued with gentle conversation. Stories of the past were shared not as heavy pain, but as memories now safe enough to revisit. Hoài Ca listened to details about her parents, about the years her family had searched for her. Though regret still lingered, she no longer felt empty, because she knew she still had loved ones by her side. As afternoons slowly faded, the last rays of sunlight filtered through the leaves in the herbal garden behind the house. Hoài Ca stepped outside, standing among the rows of vibrant green plants. The spring breeze lightly stirred the young leaves, carrying a soft, familiar scent. Beside her stood her grandparents, their eyes shining with pride and relief. A little farther away, her brother and Hùng were deep in conversation. There was no longer the distance of boss and subordinate, only the trust of men who might soon become family. Hùng looked toward Hoài Ca, his gaze softening. He knew the road ahead would bring changes, but he felt no fear. No matter what role he played, he would still stand by her side. A new spring had arrived. Not a spring of waiting and loss, but one of reunion and new beginnings. Petals drifted gently in the breeze, as if closing one chapter and opening another filled with hope. Yet the future still held uncertainties. Would Hùng loving his superior sister change their professional relationship in unexpected ways? How would Hoài Ca adapt to her new role within the large family she had just found? And their wedding, the dream once mentioned during the new year, would it finally be celebrated in complete joy, now that every missing piece had returned? The journey ahead continues. Each step will bring challenges, but also opportunities for love to prove itself once again.
Xin chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình đang đưa đến video về câu chuyện của Hoài Ca và Hùng nha mọi người. Như mọi người cũng đã biết thì Hoài Ca thời gian gần đây thì luôn cố gắng để có thể tìm thấy người thân của mình. Và Hùng thì trong một lần nhặt được chiếc ví của ông của sếp thì cũng đã thấy một hình ảnh ở trong ví rất là quen, đó là người cháu thất lạc của ông. Thì anh thấy rất là giống Hoài Ca và sau đó anh cũng có nhiều mối nghi ngờ, nhưng mà mọi chuyện đều không ấy. Thì hôm đấy khi mà anh nghĩ đến việc là sẽ đưa Hoài Ca đến nhà ông để có thể học thuốc nam, thì ngay từ cái nhìn đầu tiên của ông nhìn thấy Hoài Ca thì đã thấy rất là giống người con gái trước kia của mình. Thì ông đã có một nỗi nghi ngờ đó chính là cháu của mình. Và trong tập này thì sau xét nghiệm ADN thì đã xác minh được đó chính là ông ngoại của Hoài Ca và cả hai đã đoàn tụ. Vậy thì liệu diễn biến tiếp theo sẽ như thế nào? Hãy đón xem vào những tập tiếp theo nhé mọi người. Tạm biệt.